And I'm making you host, and you can just make me co-host again.
Captioner, could you just do one more test quickly so we can make sure that it's coming through the YouTube? Captioner, were you able to do a test for the YouTube stream? Test, test, test. Thank you.
Good.
Betsy, is that showing up?
Yes, it showed up on the YouTube stream.
Great, thank you. And I've started the recording. Good morning, Karen. Just to let you know, we are live streaming and the meeting is being recorded, and we'll get started in a few minutes. Thank you. Good morning for those of you who've just joined us. We are live streaming and the meeting is being recorded. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, good morning, folks. I'm George Worthington. I'm a Dementia Services Coordinator with the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, and this is the first meeting for 2021 of the Coordinated Care Workgroup of the Alzheimer's Disease and Related Disorders Commission. Our chair, Karam Khan, is unable to be with us today, so I'll be chairing the meeting in his place. We do have a quorum. Laura Bowser may join us as we go on, but if we can start with quick introductions, and I'll just call on folks because that'll be easier. Karen Darner.
Hi, I'm Karen Darner, and I've, excuse me, this is my third year on the commission, and I have a mom I was a caregiver to for approximately 4 years after I retired from the school system. And then my brother died during the COVID-19 pandemic at the very beginning when he was in a memory care program in Denver. And I have become a member of the lobbying team for our member of Congress, Don Beyer, in the House of Representatives, and work with a team that provides him with information as well as he provides us with information. So it's been a very good learning experience for everybody, I think. Next.
Great, thank you, Karen. Tina Turner, sorry, Tina Thomas, excuse me.
I'll take it, George, I'll take it. Because Tina has great legs. So. Good morning. My name is Tina Thomas. I am the Senior Director of Programs and Services for the Alzheimer's Association, supporting both the Greater Richmond chapter as well as the Central and Western Virginia chapter. I am so grateful to be part of this project. It has really helped me to hone in on my 30 plus years of supporting older adults across the spectrum, whether it was from home health and hospice or working in the field of dementia proper. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Tina. Fonda Neal.
Good morning, I am Fonda Neal. I am the primary caretaker of my mother, who has moderate stage dementia. She was diagnosed in February of 2018. And I also volunteer with the Greater Richmond Alzheimer's Association as a faith outreach representative, where I offer educational information and advocacy through my church. And I am happy to be a part of the group, Coordinated Care Workgroup. Thank you.
Thanks, Fonda, and we're very pleased that you're part of it. And Laura Bowser.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Laura Bowser. I am the chair of the Alzheimer's Commission, and I am also do a lot of volunteer work with the Greater Richmond Chapter Alzheimer's Association. And my connection to the disease is my mother passed away with early onset Alzheimer's at 57. And I've just been doing a lot of research and volunteer work since then.
Great, thank you, Laura. Okay, so just quick housekeeping. This is an electronic meeting pursuant to, hang on just a second, I'm not sure I've got everything. For those of you, I think, Laura, you weren't here. Karam Khan was unable to join us today, so I will be running the meeting on his behalf. And if you just bear with me for 2 seconds, I'll get my talking points. Okay. So due to the active state of emergency, this is an electronic meeting pursuant to item 4-0.01 of the 2020 Appropriation Act. Meeting notice has been provided. The meeting is being recorded and minutes are being taken. All votes will be conducted via a roll call of voting members. Meeting materials are posted under the Alzheimer's Disease and Related Disorders Commission's Workgroup meeting tab at the link at the vda.virginia.gov/dementia.htm website. Members of the public are able to live stream this meeting via the DAR's YouTube page. Please be advised that if the live stream is interrupted, we will need to pause the meeting until it's restored. Public comment will be accepted by email or phone to my attention. The public comments that were received by yesterday will be read, or if lengthy, summarized during the meeting when we reach that agenda item. I'm not going to go through all the Zoom functions because I know all of you have been on Zoom meetings with me before, so I will skip that. If you are video enabled, please be aware the system may capture your image and a video in the public streaming and recording. And please only use the chat feature if you have technical issues or another issue not related to the business of the meeting. Chat comments are not captured in the live stream or the recording, and so are not available to members of the public. You may use reactions, thumbs up for agreement, or clap to raise your hand to speak, although please don't use this in place of a verbal vote in a roll call vote. If you'd like to view the real-time captioning of today's meeting, please click on the CC button on the menu bar and select Show Subtitles. Zoom participants will be able to turn on closed captioning. The YouTube streaming will automatically include the captions. For all votes, we will do a roll call and you will be asked to indicate support, yes or no, yes or opposition, nay or no, or abstain. And lastly, I'd like to thank the DAR's video teleconferencing team and the DAR's communication team for making this electronic meeting possible. I'll do a quick roll call to confirm attendance. I know Karim Khan's not here. Laura Bowser.
Here.
Karen Darner.
Here.
Fonda Neal.
Here.
Tina Thomas.
Here.
Great, okay, we didn't lose anybody. Okay, let me just show the agenda, and the first order of business, as usual, will be to approve the agenda or adopt the agenda for today. Can everybody see that okay?
Well, I've got mine. Yes,
Yeah.
now it's
Okay, great, thank you. If you can review that quickly, does anybody have anything they'd like to add to the agenda?
no.
No.
Okay, if somebody would like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I
I'll make-
move that
Go ahead.
I move that the agenda be approved. Karen Darner.
Thank you, Karen. May I have a second?
I'll second. This is Laura Bowser.
Thank you. And that's a good place to remind folks, if you can just identify yourself when you start speaking, it helps with the captioning and also for minutes. So we'll do a roll call vote. Laura Bowser.
Yes.
Karen Darner.
Yes.
Fonda Neal.
Yes.
And Tina Thomas.
Yes.
Right. So the agenda is adopted. So the next order of business is to review and adopt the previous minutes, which you should have received in an email, but hopefully you can see these on the screen now. Were there any changes to the minutes or comments?
No?
No, I'm scrolling too fast to read.
Right. I haven't noticed any when I looked at it.
Okay. So, all right, well, if there are no changes, we'll declare those adopted. And the next order of business, public comment. So no public comment was received. So the next order of business, getting down to the heart of the matter today, is the Dementia Roadmap draft, which I sent everybody. Let me share that. Okay. Can everybody see this okay? The Word document?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So what I've sent you today, or before the meeting, was a relatively format-free version of the Dementia Roadmap, which we've been working on for the last 6 months or so. So the idea was really to focus on the content. This was to give you an opportunity to review the content before we start designing it and putting it into a nicer form for the full commission to review in March. So we won't have a fully completely designed version by then, but at least it should give folks a sense, and the content is really key at this point. We do have several months yet before our deadline, which is the June meeting of the commission. So there were a couple of things that I asked you to focus on in terms of the content that were things that we hadn't really discussed at previous meetings. And as I was going through and listening, well, I was listening to the Raised Family Caregiver quarterly meeting, and they were talking about the importance of not excluding the person with dementia from the Dyad. So the Dyad meaning the caregiver and the person living with dementia. So all through the roadmap, it refers to your loved one as the person living with dementia. But to me, that seems like we're excluding people living alone with dementia, or people maybe in the earlier stages who might be reading this for themselves to get information about what their future, what they need to be thinking about to plan for their future. So I was proposing that we change that your loved one to you or your loved one, where appropriate in the document.
Right.
So I don't know. Do folks have thoughts on that?
Agreed.
Agree.
I think it makes it easier. Yes.
Okay, great. The other thing was that I noticed that we didn't actually have a table with the area agencies on aging, and we're referring to the area agencies multiple times through this document as primary service providers. So I was proposing that we put, so it's a kind of a risky thing, because once you put in that table with phone numbers, someone's phone number is going to change. And so we either can refer them to the DAR's website, which we keep updated as any changes are received from the AAAs, or we can go ahead and include them and expect that those are going to need to be updated at some point. I would say the AAAs, so out of the 25 AAAs, we get changes about once in one a year or so. So it's not a huge amount of change, and it won't become obsolescent too quickly. But I'd like to get some thoughts on what you think about. Do we link to a page that's going to be a web page that's constantly updated, or do we provide a table that might risk going out of date? So the idea that it would just be easier for folks to refer to something that's in front of them rather than have to go and look elsewhere to get that information.
Yeah. And George, would there be an option to do both? So to put the information in the document as well as reference how to go to DARS to get more updated information. And I say that because I'm concerned about folks in very rural communities who may not have access to the internet. If they've got this printed document in front of them, they may find that very useful.
Yeah, there is no reason why we can't have both. So I'd say that might be the way to go. Karen, did you have?
Yes, George. Actually, I was going to say about the same thing, because we've been working here in Arlington on several areas where we find that older people will often not have access, or they may have access but be concerned about, have a lack of confidence in being able to find everything that they need. And so I think the best thing to do would be to put as much in this as possible, and especially at least listing the different areas of on aging, because it's that again too is going to be something that they won't be sure of where they fit in the list, and this way the names will be familiar, hopefully, and they'll get a better idea about getting the right phone number at the right time. So
Yeah. Great points. And I will say that there is a phone number that we're including as well. So you see throughout the document where we refer folks to the AAAs. Up to today, we've had the web link as well as the DARS phone number, where they can, so it's the one phone number that people can call to get the latest contact information for the AAAs. But I think putting in a table with all the AAAs will be useful as well for the reasons that you all stated. Any other comments on that? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move forward to the next section. So as I said, there's very little formatting. I just included bullets so that it was easier to see what was tied to what headings. But there were a couple of sections that I wanted to ask people to look at, and that the one is the younger onset Alzheimer's disease. So we had talked briefly about this, I believe, where we would highlight a little bit of information about younger onset Alzheimer's, just one, to be inclusive, and two, for educational purposes, and three, because of stories like our commission member Karen Garner, where obtaining a diagnosis was extremely difficult for someone who didn't fit in the normal age range for what doctors expect for a dementia diagnosis. So I wanted to keep this pretty simple, and again, relatively brief, since it would fit in a box early on. So in the wondering and worried section. So did anybody have any thoughts about this section? Again, really keeping it simple and providing some references to websites where people could get more information. Karen?
yes, I was concerned. I think maybe a quick sentence or something that includes the fact that it has been something that's brand new as far as being tied to the Older Americans Act, which opens it up to a number of things that are available to people that young, and that even, we've tried to include them, but when it comes to getting certain treatments or special considerations for legal assistance and things like that, they've been blocked because they weren't covered by the Older Americans Act. And that may give them a little bit of idea about how new this is really new to being able to have access. The other thing is that one of the programs we accessed recently was about the research that's being done. And in the past, everybody's been lumped together, no matter what the variety of dementia or even early onset. And so what they've found is it's better to put people in their diagnosis area. And then you have a much clearer picture of the person as they progress through trials, if they're in a trial of some kind with medication. And I don't know if we have to include that, but it just seems like it's something that to know that finding a way to end Alzheimer's is a continuous process. You know, it's like you talk about the journey that we're on in this particular handbook. It's also a journey for decision making with regard to research and who it affects and how it affects a person and what their particular diagnosis might be. I don't know, you know, I hadn't thought about whether to include it or not. It sparked my interest in what they were talking about with research, but it also might, you know, we could refer them perhaps to someone if they wanted to get more information about research and how they could participate if they wished.
Okay. So Karen, the last bullet point here is referring to the changes in the Older Americans Act last year. So were you thinking of something more than this? So the Older Americans Act programs available through your local area agency on aging were opened in 2020 to those caring for people diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease of any age. Contact your area agency on aging for information on caregiving supports available.
Right, that's essentially what I was thinking, but boy, I sure did. Somehow I missed that. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay. Yep. No problem. As for the research, I'm not sure. Did we? So the only mention of research is further down in the early stage section. So I take your point that it would be useful to include that earlier because it's not just for people necessarily with the diagnosis, but also for healthy folks.
Right.
And also people in even earlier than early stage portions of the disease, so that real prodromal state before symptoms are very prominent. So, so if we move this bullet point up much further into maybe the general section at the beginning, or the wondering and worried, or we include it in multiple sections. I'm open to either of those ideas.
I like
thoughts?
that idea too.
To include it in every stage, or to just put it earlier in the piece?
I think if you're gonna include it, George, it's probably best to put it in every stage, just because people, they may zone in on the stage that's more specific to them, as opposed to read it as just one document.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
And George, I don't know if it's already in there, but maybe a line about the diagnosis of early onset doesn't mean that you're early in the disease. Because I know that there's been a lot of confusion when we talk to people. They think that if you have an early onset diagnosis, it just means that you're stage 1.
Yeah, and I guess that's why so mostly I hear, people are talking about, to differentiate it from early stage Alzheimer's, to talk about younger onset rather than early onset. I think a few years ago, early onset was pretty common, but I don't hear it as much now. So maybe just having some indication here that maybe also known as early onset.
Yes, that's good.
And then something about differentiating with early stage.
Oh, let me look at yours. Wait a minute, George. Younger onset and early onset or early stage, they're two completely different things from my perspective. Younger onset is just you're a younger person under the age of 65 impacted by this disease. Early onset, you could be any age. So it's not the same.
Early, so I feel like we're getting into a bit of confusion between early onset and early stage. So do you think this would be confusing to folks?
Let me make sure, George, I'm looking at because I'm looking at your screen and my screen at the same time. Are you typing in the box for younger onset or for early stage?
Into the younger onset.
Yes.
That Tina, when you say early onset can happen at any age, can you just clarify that for me? I'm not sure I'm understanding.
So, I could be 70, 75 and newly diagnosed. I'm early in the disease process. That's different from younger onset. Younger onset is anybody who's diagnosed under the age of 65. They're younger in the disease process when the diagnosis is happening. They could be younger and early at the same time, but early is beyond the age of 65. It's not younger.
Right.
Yeah, that's what everyone gets so confused about.
Okay, so I'm not the only one right now. And I think we want to avoid further confusing people who are reading this. So
younger onset Alzheimer's disease or dementia, typically known is identified as people under the age of 65.
Yeah. The Alzheimer's disease that appears in people under the age of 65 is called younger onset Alzheimer's disease. So maybe you may have heard something like you may have heard this as early onset, even though it's not.
I wouldn't put it in there. I just would just say,
okay.
Here's younger onset Alzheimer's disease. Here's what it is, and that's it.
Okay, so just take out anything to do with early onset.
I would, yes. And I don't know if others have thoughts on that.
Do we know
Anybody else got some?
Yeah, and I guess my question is, do we know if doctors are using the right terminology? Just because I know my mother was diagnosed with early onset, and this was 8 years ago, but it was not early onset. It was just younger onset.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we know there's more work to be done in that space.
Yeah, and I do think that shift in terminology that has occurred to try and prevent that confusion between getting the disease younger and being in an earlier stage of the disease. I think that was what prompted that shift away from early onset to younger onset, just to clarify that. But I'm sure people are still thinking in the old terms. So.
And the only reason I stress this point, George and others, is when we have a younger onset support group, These are usually people who are younger in the disease process. If a person calls us and they want to attend a younger onset support group, when we made mistakes in the past and just sent them to the early stage support group, early stage newly diagnosed, they were disappointed because they didn't feel that they could connect with anyone in the room. So we had to differentiate that out. Early stage is one thing and younger onset is something else.
Yeah, okay. So I guess the question is, do we need to make that explicit, or do we talk about younger onset in this section, and then we talk about early stage dementia in further down the track?
That's what I would do. I would okay. Just talk about it. But my one question about this section was going to be, it just says younger onset Alzheimer's disease. Do we want to consider younger onset Alzheimer's disease or other dementias? Because some people have frontal temporal or some other type of dementia, and it adversely impacts younger people.
Yeah, very good point, Tina. So younger onset Alzheimer's disease or another dementia. Something like that?
Yes.
Alzheimer's disease or another dementia that appears. Okay, so I can run through the rest and make sure that it is consistent. Any other thoughts about this section? Okay. If you think of anything, going forward, just email me or give me a call. So the other area that I wanted to focus on was the caring for the caregivers section, which is further down. Let me just find it. Okay, so that's caring for the care partner. This just has a brief statement about the importance of self-care and the options to do virtual things, the Caregiver 10 Commandments, and then some suggestions on what people can do, and some relevant links, including the new or revised resource guide for caregivers that the Virginia Caregiver Coalition is finishing up.
Good.
So I wanted, again, to try and keep this relatively short, but just to highlight the importance of self-care and without, I didn't put any statistics in or anything like that. We could, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So George, since going back to your initial thoughts of making sure that the person living with dementia feels included in this document, if we have something that's caring for the care partner, do we need something that's caring for you? That's speaking more to the person who's impacted by the disease, or do we need to add that language? Caring for yourself or your care partner, because those younger onset people, they are looking for these resources for themselves.
Yeah. I think, and correct me if you think this might be wrong, but all of the information that's included in the stage by stage sections is really geared towards that person living with dementia as well. Whereas this is specifically, and not for the care partner or caregiver. So, whereas this is specifically to highlight the need for not the person living with dementia, but for the person that's caring for them to be mindful of their own needs.
This is Fonda. And this is, when I look at these 10 commandments, to me, they would apply to me as the caregiver, but also anyone that's interacting with that person living with dementia.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, okay.
Yes, that's true. That's in this context, I think it's really aimed at so given that this document is aimed at the person living with dementia and informal caregivers for the most part. I mean, yes, professional caregivers could make use of the information that's in here, but it's really aimed at the person living with dementia and the informal caregivers. So the professional caregiver, one would hope, would have received some training in communication skills and things like that, and so that would have been included. Yeah, yes, you would hope so.
Not been my experience, and my mother is at an assisted living, but your point taken.
Yeah, so if a family caregiver or has this and is working with a professional caregiver who they think maybe isn't, maybe hasn't received that training that they should have or could benefit from, then they can show them this. But I think the primary thrust of this document is for those informal folks and the person living with dementia.
Right. I think this is awesome because it's the constant reminder of these 10 commandments is crucial. It's like very important.
Thanks for that. When you were reading this, did anything strike you as? Did anything spring to mind that you thought, I wish this was in there, or I wish this wasn't?
No, I use all of these all the time. Particularly
I'm speaking to that whole section. Sorry, not just the commandments.
No, I mean, I don't have anything to add. This is good.
I mean, Georgian, if there's time, I mean, I'd love to just continue to move through all those stages. I'm just looking through those to see, is there space to add one bullet point for the person that's living through this and not caring for someone through this? Because that's a lot. It's written for the person living with the disease or caregiver, but a lot of the content seems to be geared towards that caregiver, even here where we're talking about these 10 commandments, is there an opportunity to put down some 10 commandments for self-care if you're living with those things they need to do for themselves in the middle of this process?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Tina. So this caregiver 10 commandments is something that many caregivers and people leading caregiver support groups and things would be familiar with. It's a widely circulated list of points to remember as you interact with somebody living with dementia. I am not familiar with anything similar that is geared towards the person living with dementia, but if you have some ideas about that or some thoughts about where I could find something like that, please let me know.
Sure, will do.
Because I'd like to do everything possible to make this as inclusive for the person living with dementia as well, but recognizing that particularly as we move into the later stages, that it's primarily going to be the informal caregiver that's going to be making use of this. But yes, we've got plenty of time. We could let me just check the agenda. So the Dementia Capable Virginia Initiative update, I don't have a lot to add on that right now, and I can probably do that more effectively in the full commission meeting. Just that the only thing I would say on that before we come back to the document is that each of the work groups is about at the same stage we are, and in other words, kind of at the final early process and getting into the stage of putting those final products together. As you know, much of the actual, so for this project, the printing and distribution costs were going to be funded by the BOLD Act grant from the DDH received, or Virginia Department of Health. I'm not really sure where we stand on that right now, so that's a bit of an unknown, and I hopefully can provide more information on that at the next commission meeting or the next work group meeting. In terms of the 2021 to 2022 Coordinated Care Committee focus, so the idea here is that as we're winding this project down, we need to start thinking about what we'd like to pick up for this work group's activity starting in July, because I still anticipate this document being pretty much printer ready by the June commission meeting. So just the process from here would be, today we approved this draft. It sounds like there might be another round of edits given what we're discussing, and so perhaps we have another shorter meeting prior to that March 9th commission meeting just to approve the content. But I'll let you weigh in on that in a second. And then after the commission approves the draft, then it goes out to stakeholders for comment and feedback. I'm compiling a list of people that I'd like to send it to, but if you have ideas on other stakeholders that you think we should, who would like to review this content, please let me know. I'd like to circulate it as widely as possible and make sure that I'm not missing any of those key stakeholders out. Once we have that feedback, we would look to meet this work group would meet again prior to the June 9th commission meeting to approve that final draft, and then it goes to the commission for approval, and then hopefully to the printers following that, and if not, at least to the designer. On the other two aspects, the art and the caregiver spotlight quotes. So I've sent out a request for submissions early in January, and I gave a deadline of the end of February just to allow people plenty of time to get things together. I sent that out pretty widely. We highlighted it in the DARS weekly mailing on Monday this week. I've had one bit of feedback, but no submissions yet. So yes, I'll send those two announcements out with the follow-up meeting materials so that you can share those as well with folks. So In terms of the focus going forward, I don't have any strong ideas at this point, but I just wanted to get you guys thinking about what we might focus on. One thing that I was thinking is, I know this kind of overlaps with training, but I also think it's very much part of coordinated care, is to work with the AAAs to perhaps identify a dementia champion in each agency who would be kind of the subject matter expert for resources and supports within the agency. We have had the dementia capable training for AAA staff available since 2015, and really the uptake has been pretty poor. So I'm not sure if maybe that online, I would have thought the online training would be, it's easy to access. It doesn't take a long time to complete, and I would have thought we'd have a lot more interest in it. So I don't know if you feel like this falls under the coordinated care, but I do. It does overlap with training for sure, but I'm wondering if that might be something that we work on next, starting in July. But anyway, if you have any thoughts on future direction, please share them with me. Does anybody have any ideas right away?
I think, George, more ideas may surface once the bold implementation project starts to really roll out. When we see what DDH is going to do, they are absolutely going to need some support with that, and there might be something that we can do collaboratively to help meet that need.
That's a great point, Tina, and I wholeheartedly support that. And I had thought that as well, that there would probably be something that would fall out of that we could lend our aid to. So, okay, well, we can let that percolate for a few months. As I said, I just wanted to flag that. And if nobody's got any other points to raise, we can return to the document.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, so Tina, how would you like me just to kind of scroll through and somebody say stop when we get to somewhere, or would you like me to kind of summarize each section as we get to it?
Yeah, you could summarize each section. There was, wait a minute, I gotta bring my document back up. I'm looking at yours and mine at the same time. There was one thing I was gonna point out when we were talking about younger onset. I think it was the second page down. Oh gosh, let me get my document back up. There was a suggestion. I think it's on page 6. And it's in the second bullet point.
Oh yeah.
So I think if we're going to change it to Alzheimer's disease and other dementias up top, here where it says including useful guides for those with younger onset Alzheimer's disease, we might want to also add that language there as well. So it's the last sentence just before you get to bullet 3.
Yeah. So I'll put in those with younger onset Alzheimer's disease or another dementia.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll summarize section by section. So the first section, well, the first couple of pages are the contents. So these bullet points in the original document were tied to that kind of subway line graphic to show the progression and the journey. We hadn't really we added a couple of bullet points, but we hadn't made any significant changes to the content. Then there's a section, the immediate next section is some kind of overall look at what the process of or progression of dementia is like and what that journey might be like, and what the rationale for this roadmap is. So this was, and again, wherever it says loved one, certainly in the earlier portions of the document, we want to have you or a loved one, yourself, or whatever, that more inclusive language. So I will go through and do that after this meeting. I'm not going to make you all sit through each edit like that. Okay, we've talked about the younger onset box. So on page 6 of this format-free guide is the overall guide for the journey. It highlights some key referrals that are going to be useful at every stage. So that's the area agencies, the Alzheimer's Association, and just to alert folks that there are other supports available that you need to pay for. Some basic information about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, what's the difference, and then a description of the terms we're using. So loved one, care partner, family caregiver, and other friends and family.
So George, I had a question or a thought. Would it be helpful if right under where you are, what the guides for the journey, where you're talking about the different resources and agencies, would it be helpful if there you had an asterisk that might say something like, this is recommendations for persons living with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia. And that way, as you move through the document, if it's appropriate, you could just put an asterisk there. It could be a one-line sentence or recommendation for the person living with dementia, because I don't think that is necessarily warranted under each category, but in those categories where it is warranted, you could highlight that so they know to be looking for that.
Okay, so let me just make sure I'm getting that. Have some sort of symbol that indicates the content reference is aimed at the person living with dementia as well. Is that what you're?
Yes, but yes.
I'm wondering, maybe we turn it around and have some sort of symbol that indicates it's really just for the caregivers. But maybe it's never just for the caregivers.
I think all of this information is very useful for a caregiver. But it's not all the way it's written useful for a person who's living with the disease, because when it speaks to language like reach out to your person's doctor and or provider, it could be a suggestion to the person who's early in the disease process and they're doing the planning is develop a support team, or something like that, to give them a little bit of guidance in terms of what they should be doing.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
And I don't want to overthink it and put too much work on you, George. And I just say that because we've talked about this before. There's a swath of people who they don't necessarily feel like a lot of the content is for them.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, we do want to try and make it as inclusive as possible. So Okay. I'll come up with a couple of ideas for that, Tina, and share those with you over the next week or so. Share those with the group and get some feedback and see how we can best do that. Does that sound good?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so then the next section, this on page 7, although it might be a different page now, but the wondering and worried section. So this is where we start the stage by stage content. So for example, those first bullet points, you may be wondering, is everything okay? Should my loved one, so there we need to address the language, should I or my loved one be checked by a healthcare professional? I will go through and do all that. But each stage contains the same sections. So those bullet points at the top, which correspond to the bullet points that are on the contents page. Then what should you expect in this stage, what you can do, and then the action steps, which is we'll put in a box. So for example, this bullet point makes sure both you and your loved one are making healthy lifestyle choices. So that would be an example of that inclusive language.
Yeah, that's real good, George. Very good.
But up here, if you don't feel comfortable with your loved one's current healthcare professionals, obviously need to rejig that. But we'll just take that as read throughout the document. The action steps build on each other. So you'll see that several of the action steps are repeated throughout in each box at each stage. Not all of them, but several of them are several of them do reappear. We've discussed each of those action steps before. So the next stage would be the MCI stage, mild cognitive impairment. So we get a definition of it, and then again the bullet points, what you should expect, what you can do. And then, so here it begins some specific ones aimed at caregivers, but then really those to help your loved one, that really applies to the person living with dementia on their own or without a caregiver. So again, need to address that. And then the action steps box. So you can see that many of those action steps were already included in that first stage, the wondering and worried stage. Moving into the end, please stop me as I'm going, because I'm going through relatively quickly. So then the early stage dementia, the same, the bullet points that tie in with the contents page. What you should expect, and there's a talk about a bit of wording about strengths and focusing on the person's strengths. And then what you can do. So again, this is partly aimed at caregivers and partly aimed at people living with dementia. As I'm going through, I'm thinking about having some sort of symbol like Tina suggested. I think that seems like a good idea.
So for sorry, George.
No, go ahead.
So one example right here on page 11, where it says, you may be wondering, are there any medications or treatments or lifestyle changes? So one of those bullet point types of things, just on medication alone, could be, consider contacting your local pharmacist for assistance with medication management. And that would be something in the early stages a person with dementia could do on their own, just talking to their pharmacist who could give them some suggestions on ways to manage their medications if they're living home alone, whether it's pre-packaged, pre-bubble, whatever. We don't have to tell them what. It's just if they have the conversation, the pharmacist could help them with that.
Yeah. So
it could be or a healthcare provider about medication management.
Yeah. So there's this managing safe medication use that's in the wondering and worried section. Let's see. I think, okay, it looks like we had added something in on that early stage about medication and doctor communication, which I did not actually do anything about. So somebody must have made that point before. So Tina, I'll flesh out that bullet point.
Awesome.
Sorry for not picking that up. Anything else that leaps out in the early stage section? There's the research bullet point that we'll include in other stages as well. And this is the first section that really focuses on particular services to think about. So there's a list of things available in Virginia there. And then some specific language aimed at caregivers. I'm suggesting they contact area agency or Alzheimer's Association for support. And then the action steps. So here, these are mainly new action steps, and it just refers back to the previous boxes. So in addition to those, make sure you do these as well. Otherwise, the boxes were going to get very large. Then moving into mid-stage. So I don't want to assume, but I would imagine that from this stage on, much of this is really aimed at a caregiver rather than the person living with dementia. But
yeah, I would say so.
But that person would probably say somebody with maybe who has a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment might want to read through this anyway, just to see what things they might want to consider ahead. Do we want to have any specific suggestions for people living alone at any stage?
I would suggest in the earlier stage, when they have a lot more decision-making capacity and autonomy, that they identify a care partner, care supporter. Some people don't have children and they don't have that. So they may want to connect up with a geriatric care manager or someone who can help manage this and support them throughout the process. So if they know they have no one, this is the time we need to get that in place.
George, this is an area too where it could be, we talked about from then on would be primarily caregiver, but there are going to be times when the caregiver can go over this information with a person who is alone or is alone for most of the day, or so that they, they're involved in the process, and they also will be able to give some input as to how that particular question or area would affect them one way or the other. They might be able to reflect on that, and that would be helpful too.
Yep. So maybe in that very beginning section, we have where it's the overview of the guide. We have a specific bullet points for how to use the guide if you live alone, if you maybe just that one is that one's the trickiest one. So maybe worried about memory loss in yourself or a loved one. If you live alone, there are some special considerations, something like that. Just to flag that right up at the beginning, and then I'll look through and see if there's other places where that could be highlighted as well.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, all right, back to the mid-stage. So again, the bullet points, what you may be wondering things to do, what you can expect. Things that, so you, Sarah? Yep.
I was going to say maybe in mid-stage add, oftentimes people lose their ability to read. But oftentimes the individual will hide that. So it's just important, I think, for the caregiver to know that they might not have the capacity to read.
Yeah, that's a good point. So do you think that's language generally, or is it reading specifically?
I think it's
reading.
It's
reading and writing, maybe.
Yeah, because they won't be able to read their medications or even read stop signs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Let alone directions on the medication.
Right.
That's something to check on, just the size of the font. It is so impossible now. And also the different kinds of instruction for, let's see, I forgot. Let's see. Different kinds of instruction in general on medications, like make sure they're childproof, or if the caregiver has them in a safer place, then they might want a couple of them to be easier to access than the childproof caps. But I don't know. That one gets a little complicated. The best part are the caps that can flip over and become not childproof, and then they flip back to become childproof. But again, those are all little things that you think about after you've gotten the prescriptions refilled or something. So maybe just keeping a list of questions that the caregiver may have, and can work with the person who's been diagnosed, just as if they're working together at a certain point, they can make a notation of that. I'm not sure.
You're muted, George.
Sorry, I hit airplane mode on my laptop and it knocked me out of the meeting, of course. So that's why I'm not sharing any longer. I'm just trying to, I need to be a co-host again. If somebody can make me a co-host so I can share my screen again. Sorry about that, folks. In the meantime, so that's going to make it a little difficult to do this without being able to share. But hopefully you all can follow along in your own documents. Okay, great. So the rest of that section, take your point, Karen, and I'll have a look again about that. For the rest of that mid-stage section, there's what you can do. There's a whole bunch of bullet points aimed mainly at the caregiver, but some of those might be aimed at the person living with dementia as well. I'll check those. Then there's a whole bunch of other services to consider. Okay, hang on, I can share again. Okay, everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I need to learn my laptop better. So yeah, services to consider, and then the action steps box again, it refers back to each of those previous ones. And then it has the first conversation about residential care options and alternatives. And then for the late stage dementia, the same. So this is really going to be aimed much more at caregivers. But again, somebody living alone might want to read this earlier, or somebody living with dementia might want to read this earlier. But by this stage, it's really going to be the caregiver. Things that they might be wondering about, what to expect in each stage. In this stage, things that the caregiver may experience, such as profound grief, and then what you can do for yourself and for your loved one. Services to consider. So this is much more about bringing in professional supports and some self-care options as well. And that's the end of the stage by stage section. And then we move into this. In the original document, there was the infographic on dementia quick reference, which includes the 10 warning signs, and then a stage by stage things that symptoms that are likely to appear in each stage. So this might be another place to make sure there's something about reading. Let's see. Yeah, do people agree that we could put a bullet point about that in there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Then the next section is communication tips and strategies. These are clearly aimed at caregiver or other family members. And so some of these are the same things that are going to appear in that Caregiver's 10 Commandments, but I like having the 10 Commandments separate so that if somebody wanted, they could cut that out or copy it and put it on their fridge. So then the specific and new caring for the care partner or caring for yourself, or you might want to just rethink what it's all about.
George, and under this communication space, I think this is a great space also, you know, when you come up with the symbol, is to say, if you're a person living with the disease, be sure to, you know, make your wishes known, you know, communicate that to somebody, whether it's care partner, neighbor, friend, their lawyer. It's a great time for them to articulate what it is that they want.
Sorry, what's a great time?
In that early stage is a great time for this person to articulate it. Because here you're just giving tips for communication. So while the person can still communicate it, it's a good time for them to share with someone what it is that they want.
Right. Okay, so as in this is how I would like to be treated, or?
Correct, whatever those needs would be.
Yeah. Okay.
Communicate that to someone.
These will be in. Okay. I mean, that sounds like it would be something to put right up at in one of those earlier sections. So I'll have a play with that. Anything else about the communication or the caregiver self-care? Okay, so the last section is the resources mentioned in this document. So I have gone through and checked all the phone numbers and web links. The one thing that we had a question about was the safety concerns for people with dementia. That was a separate document that the Washington State Dementia Action Alliance had put together. I have emailed them to get permission to reproduce or adapt that for Virginia. I haven't heard anything back, so I'll follow up on that. I think I did that before Christmas. So, but if we don't, then I'll look for another reference that we can send folks to, because I think having safety information is really useful. So this covers basic information and guides, resources for legal and advanced care planning, resources on other dementias, and then a notes page. And then the summary of action steps would be the last box.
Yeah.
And then the final page is the acknowledgements page. So short bit about the commission, the state plan, thanks and gratitude to the Dementia Action Collaborative for developing the roadmap and for allowing us to adapt it. Thanks to the Alzheimer's Association, DAWs, and the area agencies. And so I think we should have an acknowledgement of our work group, but in addition to that, what do you folks think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. Without the work group, it wouldn't have happened. So, and then a box on how folks can order, how folks can actually access this document and where it's housed. And that obviously the bit about having a paper copy will be dependent on funding. And that's it. So anybody else have any kind of final thoughts before we wrap this up on the document itself?
I don't think so. I just, I know we talked about the art earlier and the kind of call for art. Do we have a plan for what we're going to do in lieu of that?
No, not yet. Do you have any ideas? I mean, the alternatives would be to use stock photos.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll think on it.
I'd really hope we can avoid using stock photos, but even if we don't have a large amount of art received, I think we can still highlight that, and maybe we just, move away from having too many photos and I don't know.
I don't know. I think once you send out the email again, George, give another nudge, because I know we widely distributed that information. So just let folks, give another nudge and let them know that the deadline is approaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 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 So it's still 4 weeks. I think I said the 26th. So I'll get this sent out in the DARS mailing, not next Monday, but the following Monday again, and then I'll send it out to my stakeholders, and I'll get it out to you all early next week so that you can share it widely as well.
Perfect.
And then for the document itself, I'll go through and incorporate those changes we've talked about today and get that to you early next week as well. And we could either vote to accept this with those proposed changes, or we can hold off and have a shorter meeting before the next commission meeting, in which we would vote to send the draft to the full commission for its review. What would you prefer?
Maybe.
I think as acting chair, I think it's better for you to see it before we send it to the commission. So
I agree. I agree.
Okay, so if we plan on having like at most a half-hour meeting towards the end of maybe that last week of February. Hopefully, I should have some submissions to show you by then, and we can see what that might look like. But at the very least, we can approve the text.
Okay.
Sounds good, George.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else?
Thank you, George, for what you're doing. It's shaping up really, really nice.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
A lot of work.
Thank you for all
Great
your input and ideas, because without those, it wouldn't be happening. So, okay, well, look for an email from me early next week with all the follow-up information, and I'll send out a doodle poll for the last week of February as well, and we'll aim to do that. And hopefully, Karim will be able to join us then as well.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, well, thanks everybody for coming today, and
Thank
with
you,
that,
Jill.
we'll adjourn.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you
Yes.
all, and Happy New Year.
Bundle up.
Thanks, Tina.
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Yes,
Bye-bye.
Bye.
they say.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good one, George.
Thanks, Joyce. You
You're
too.
welcome. Bye-bye now. Don't forget,
All right.
contact them in regards to you two for the upcoming meetings.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Maybe they can
Thanks,
be on.
Betsy.
Maybe they can be on the invitation that you sent out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
I've
right.
invited you for next week's.
Oh, okay, sure. All right.
Yeah. All
Bye-bye.
right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.